This is a KRQE Investigates special with Gabrielle Burkhart and Ann Perrette.
Hello and welcome to our inaugural KRQE Investigates quarterly special with your KRQE Investigates team. I'm Gabrielle Burkhart and I have with me Ann Perrette. We are your KRQE Investigates team. Over the next hour, we'll be showing you some of the most impactful investigations that Ann and I have done over the first part of the year in 2025, specifically tied to the DWI corruption scandal.
Right. We focused a lot of our reporting this year on this scandal. Really big news, especially once we started seeing police officers being federally charged, an attorney being federally charged. So we're going to take you behind the scenes of each of these stories and then share some added context, what we learned, how we kind of got to putting these pieces together.
Yeah, we're going to start with one from February where I remember the Bernalillo County Sheriff John Allen called a press conference, and it ended up making big waves here locally. And you sort of made a last minute decision that morning to go to this press conference. You had to reschedule something else. And let's just say we're all glad that you attended that press conference. Let's play the story and then we'll get into some Q&A about it.
I've never been betrayed like this in my life, and I'm pretty freaking pissed off right now.
Betrayed, he says, by the man he appointed undersheriff in January 2023, Johan Hereño, who the FBI has told him is under federal investigation, believed to have taken bribes to allow drunk drivers off the hook. The Bernalillo County Sheriff says Hereño let him know this past Saturday the feds interviewed him.
It completely makes me sick, and I literally got sick and threw up on my garbage can.
Sheriff John Allen asked Hereño to resign on Sunday, and he did. He says he only became suspicious about his undersheriff when the feds interviewed BCSO Deputy Jeffrey Hamrill in January because Hereño's body language changed, and the sheriff says the feds wouldn't talk to him.
How in the hell would the FBI ever trust me when my right-hand man who speaks for me would give me any other information? That is another red flag.
Sheriff Allen says the FBI is talking to him now, but he knows this photo that we obtained and made public on Monday isn't helping him convince them he's not involved.
Of course they're going to suspect me when you find me in a photo with this guy. What a piece of crap. And then he's put me in a very bad position, and anybody can spin everything and anything they want.
The sheriff is referring to paralegal Ricardo Rick Mendez, who confessed to being the coordinator of the criminal enterprise. You can see him in the center of this photo at an Albuquerque restaurant with the sheriff and Undersheriff Hereño to his left and the rest of BCSO's command staff on the right.
If anybody out there in the public thinks that I had my command staff and we were connected here asking about a DWI scheme, you are an idiot.
Asking about the circumstances surrounding their lunch set Sheriff Allen off.
Folks, it's okay for me to have lunch. The question should be, who paid for the lunch and did I accept any gifts from Mr. Mendez? No. Do people buy me lunch? Yes. Do I take photos with people? Folks, I take 100 photos a week with people. I am a politician and the sheriff of the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office. If I ever knew that Mr. Hereño and that Mr. Mendez were doing what they were doing along with the DWI scheme, I'm going to ask you a question back. Do you think in all hell I would ever have a lunch with him? No, I would not.
He says this happened in February 2023. Not long after he became sheriff, Hereño set up the lunch with Mendez and invited the rest of the command staff, and they discussed his campaign.
Mr. Mendez is on the Republican side. I'm on the Democratic side. I'm speaking to a Republican. I thought I was able to reach across the aisle and get some answers and some questions that the Republican side had. And I'm completely side blasted now, betrayed, disappointed.
In a previous interview, the sheriff called Mendez a friend, says they've known each other since 2021, and he donated $200 to his campaign. That language changed today.
I wouldn't even call it a friendship. I will distance myself far away from that piece of crap that I can.
As he shifts his focus to moving forward without Hereño.
This isn't a black eye to the agency. This is a gut punch. This is a kick to my balls and two black eyes, to be honest with you. What do I do to stop that? How do we move forward? The rank and file that's out there right now fighting crime, now they have some gaps in leadership. I always take decisive action. How do we move forward and do it correctly?
Okay, so the sheriff obviously got heated during that press conference.
A little.
I remember here in the newsroom, you guys were live streaming it back so we could see it live from our computers. And I was just like, what is happening?
Right.
Wow. There was so much that he also said that you couldn't fit into that package. Like I remember him talking about what he ordered at that lunch.
Oh, yes.
So let's just set the scene a little bit. Tell us, what was it like sitting in the room? What was going through your mind when he started slamming the podium and, just saying how pissed off he was?
Well, this was actually a press conference about an officer-involved shooting. And then, but BCSO was under fire that week already because Monday was when his undersheriff, it was announced that he had been named in this federal investigation. Tuesday, a member of the DWI unit who had been previously named resigned. He was criminally charged. He took his plea deal that day and admitted to his involvement. So now we're at Thursday, and they have yet to talk. They've yet to hold a press conference to answer any questions about this situation. I mean, this is his right-hand man who's been named in this now.
Horeño,
yes. So we kind of took it upon ourselves. Well, you need to answer questions. So that's why we showed up. And as you could tell, I mean, defensive, I think, is almost an understatement. It was such a dramatic response from throwing up in his trash can, calling people idiots. It was just really strong language. And I remember kind of sitting there like looking at other people.
There were other reporters in the room.
Yes. Yeah. This was a press conference. His staff was also there who had been there from the beginning of that event, if you will, because of the press conference about the officer involved shooting. So everyone was kind of on edge. Like, what is happening? But again, they were under a lot of fire that week. They were under a lot of heat, and he was finally getting to address it. So
yeah, and for those who aren't familiar, that photo is with his command staff and Rick Mendez, who already had pled guilty for his role in the scheme. He was the paralegal working with Thomas Clear III.
Right.
You had a previous interview with the sheriff about, his undersheriff, and this was before Horeño was really implicated in the scheme by the feds or anyone else. How much did the sheriff's tone change from that previous interview to then this press conference, with the photo also being front and center?
Yeah, and you see a clip from that interview. The interview was, I think, like 12 or 13 days before this story aired. And he didn't love my questioning in that, but it was the first time that we were hearing from him. It was the first time that he was responding to Bernalillo County being, the sheriff's office being included as participants in this scheme. And I did ask him about Horeño in that interview because I had heard his name floated around, and we knew that he'd previously maybe been part of the DWI unit. So I looked up his record with Thomas Clear, who is this defense attorney at the center of this scheme, and saw it was, I think, an over 76% dismissal rate that he had with Clear. That's suspicious, right? So I was able to ask him about that. But in that same interview, he told me he was friends with Clear, and Clear contributed to his campaign. And yes, he knew Rick Mendez, but then as you saw, he called Thomas Clear no longer a friend, but a piece of crap. That was 13 days later that tone changed, and he was completely trying to distance himself from him. So
yeah, I remember his discussion about the photo was obviously defensive, but he had previously told you that like everyone knew Rick and Tom, right?
Right.
So tell us a little bit more about like, again, how the messaging shifted that day in the press conference.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting is it was through Ricardo Mendez's plea deal that we even learned Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office was a part of this. When he took his plea deal at the end of January, he admitted, yeah, I also worked with BCSO. I also worked with state police. Previously, we thought it'd just been Albuquerque Police Department. And so then we learn about this photo, right? And this photo is actually, it's from an Albuquerque police officer's file, a disciplinary file. So then you see this connection, right? Albuquerque police connected Mendez to BCSO members, and I don't know, it's
wild the way it unraveled. And I forgot about that part. You found the photo through a public records request through a different officer's internal affairs file.
His texts with Mendez and that photo is being sent. Hey, thanks, for connecting us so that here's our photo from lunch,
Yeah. Oh. Wow. Well, an incredible press conference there. We'll be right back. And when we come back, we are going to turn the tables a little bit and have Ann ask me some questions about one of my investigations.
Welcome back to our KRQE Investigates special. Again, we're showing you several of our stories that we've done so far in 2025. They're all centered around this DWI dismissal scandal. And through that, in our reporting and diving into this scheme, we learned not every suspected drunk driver that was pulled over by the officers who have since admitted to participating in this scheme actually paid to get off the hook. Some of them, Gabby, you found, didn't even need to be let off the hook because they didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
And so one man who was victimized by this scheme, he spoke exclusively to you, and we're going to share his story now.
57 in a 45, driving 12 miles an hour over the posted speed limit was the reason Jose Vasquez was pulled over near his family's Northeast Albuquerque home in September of 2020.
Just from the beginning, there was a power trip.
Then APD officer Honorio Alba told Vasquez he smelled alcohol on his breath.
Obviously, I knew that I hadn't been drinking, and I have a mask on. How can you smell? You have a mask on. How are you gonna be smelling the smell of alcohol?
Health issues were keeping him sober, he says, but Alba insisted on charging him with DWI.
If it was for speeding, write me up for speeding, but come on, DWI?
Nervous, his wife started recording the interaction on her cell phone. His teenage daughter and 6-year-old son watched.
My boy's asking for me. He's asking for me. I want to get here.
All his family's here. His son is here.
Vasquez asked to speak to a supervisor.
You guys know what drunk people look like. Do I look like a drunk person? What?
He doesn't.
Alba. Okay?
No.
If your sergeant feels confident that you guys will win in court, I would love.
You can all tell he's not.
Have a seat then, you're under arrest.
Alba's supervisor, former APD Sergeant Nelson Ortiz, was also there. Both officers would later be investigated for what the feds are now calling the DWI enterprise. Last week, Alba pled guilty to federal RICO conspiracy charges, admitting he conspired with defense attorney Tom Clear's office to purposefully botch DWI cases and line the pockets of everyone involved in the scheme. What was your reaction to seeing that?
I almost fell out of my bed because I was watching the news that day, and I couldn't believe it, and I was like, there it is, this is it. It did have to do with money.
Clear also pled guilty to RICO conspiracy charges, admitting he led the scheme for nearly 30 years.
This is a widespread issue of systemic corruption. The pervasiveness is unexplainable.
Taylor Smith is one of 3 attorneys now filing a class action lawsuit against the city of Albuquerque, APD Chief Harold Medina, and a long list of officers and agencies they say played crucial roles in the decades-long criminal enterprise.
The 3 of us sitting here at this table today, it is not about, hey, we want money for these people. We want it different.
They're representing Vasquez and so far 3 others who've come forward saying they too were victimized by the scheme. The lawsuit states former APD officers Alba and Joshua Montano took their arrestees' driver's licenses to Clear's paralegal Rick Mendez, who demanded cash payments from $6,000 to $10,000 in exchange for a guaranteed dismissal.
Whether it's auditing officers for funds that they receive, sitting here today, we don't know how transfer of funds exactly were made in all these circumstances, but I think that would be a first step in accountability.
But how confident are you that the scheme is stopped forever?
Sitting here today, I'm not confident in that.
Changes at the top, they say, are needed.
The way that the city has responded to date is more or less taking a victory lap, saying we stopped it, but not saying why it happened. And that's the problem. And if our own leadership is not willing to take accountability and make sure that the change happens, then we need new leadership.
Vasquez believes he gave Alba too much grief that day to be offered a break by him, but his wife says another officer on scene did mention Clear's law office.
Why would they want to give me an attorney? That's ridiculous. What cop is going to arrest you and then try and get you an attorney.
He hired a private attorney, went to trial in 2021, and won. A judge agreed with what Vasquez claimed from the get-go, finding him guilty of speeding, not guilty for DWI.
I was punished before I had a fair trial.
The damage was done.
My son still has anxiety at 10 years old when he sees police officers, and he shouldn't.
Vasquez says he and his wife were evicted when he lost work clients during his pending DWI.
I was born and raised here in Albuquerque. This is my city. This is my state. I never thought of moving out of here. And my wife and I don't want our son to be raised in this city.
In sharing his story, he hopes to give others the courage to speak up and share theirs too. Gabrielle Burkhart, KRQE Investigates.
Gabby, we just saw really raw emotion from Jose Vasquez. This whole situation clearly impacting, every facet of his life, right? Sitting with him, talking about the traffic stop, the arrest. What was that like? Did he have any hesitations in sharing what he went through?
For sure. His attorneys had contacted me, saying like he wanted to come forward and speak out. And when I met him, he came to the station. We walked upstairs. He was very nervous and told me as much that, him coming forward, putting himself on camera out there again, his wife was nervous about it. He has a child who had witnessed this whole, arrest unfold. And he was, I think, doing a pretty brave thing, speaking out. And throughout our conversation and our interview, the part where he really started to get emotional, that was honestly making me emotional sitting across from him, was talking about how he's so proud to be from Albuquerque. Like he's from this city. This is his city. But it doesn't make him feel proud to be raising his son in this city when something happened like that. And like, that's when he really started getting choked up. And that part just really got me, as parents, we all want the best for our children, and going through something so traumatic. Again, he was like adamant about his innocence of not drinking and driving because he has a medical condition that actually prevented him from drinking at the time. And also it was COVID time, so everybody was wearing masks. So he was questioning the officer, how do you smell alcohol on my breath? Like, you've got a mask on, I've got a mask on. He demanded to see a supervisor. So there was just so much to that story that, to him raised flags from the beginning.
Right. And mentioning his kid, right? We've watched a lot of Lapel. His wife recorded this on her cell phone. So we have this incident. Just in each video that we've watched, there's just a ruthlessness of these officers. You had another victim that you spoke to where he was also concerned about the kid in his car, right? These family members witnessing these arrests, you worry about the ripple effect there. Do you get a sense at all from the videos you've watched, the stories you've told, that these participating officers really had any concern that their actions would eventually come to light?
That's a good question. And making the connection of the other case you're talking about is a man named Carlos Smith, who was one of the first ones to come forward. Also, he had his young niece in the car. Yeah. And I remember watching, I've watched hours of these Lapel videos. We have to break them down into like these short television stories. So there's a lot we have to leave on the cutting room floor. In Carlos's case, Joshua Montano assured him, she'll be fine. She'll be fine. They left her on the side of the road with a PSA who then, waited for a family member to arrive to take her home. But these things do have ripple effects with the family. The aunt was really angry that had happened. Yeah. And so like he lost trust with some family members. In Jose Vasquez's case, he had a 6-year-old boy who was witnessing this, and his mom was recording because she was getting nervous about, why is this happening? So did the officers think they would get caught? Honestly, reading the plea deals, I don't think so. They had their supervisors on scene with them in some cases. In Jose Vasquez's case, there was a supervisor on scene. So, and they were signing off. The supervisor said, I'm confident in this arrest. And he said, all right, we'll go to court then. And he did, and ultimately got a dismissal for the DWI.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point of the aunt, right? Who is she going to believe, her family member or the police? We're taught, right, that the police are who we can trust. And I know we're going to dive into that question a little bit later. But first, we're going to take a break. And then when we come back, we will be sharing some exclusive video that we at KRQE Investigates obtained showing arrests of suspected drunk drivers that went nowhere, really raising a lot of questions here with this scheme. Just another angle, right?
There's so many angles, and what you and I both learned through the course of this reporting is like every time you feel like you're uncovering one thing, it's like an onion, just more and more peeling back.
Right. All right, so we will be right back with that story.
Welcome back to our KRQE Investigates special. The next story that we're going to show you and reported on back in March, and it was honestly one of the more upsetting situations to learn about. I remember, just for context, Ann and I sit across from each other at work. So when we're doing an investigation, sometimes we're learning things and I can literally turn around to her and say like, oh my gosh, look what I just found, or look at this lapel video. And I remember getting really excited when you tracked down and secured an interview with a woman who had witnessed a bad crash. She reported it, stayed on scene to talk to officers, and she assumed the case was in good hands from there. So let's play the story and then we'll chat about it.
Both of these drivers crashed their vehicles.
He was banged up pretty good. His whole head, he's all bloody and whatnot.
Okay, we got the ambulance out here for you, okay? Get you checked out.
Both were told they were under arrest for driving drunk.
You're under arrest for DWI, okay?
You're placed under arrest for driving.
But neither faced charges, and we're not naming them because according to the feds, the Albuquerque police officers handling their cases got both of these drivers to pay them off.
This person could have killed us. It could have killed someone else.
Pam Roy remembers vividly the night she witnessed one of those drivers smash his car onto I-25.
Oh my goodness, like it was yesterday.
She's the one who called 911 that February night 3 years ago in 2022. Roy described to us what she witnessed, exactly how she described it to the responding officer.
I mean, I didn't see it until he actually came up off that guardrail and flipped over onto the highway on the side. And you can see him nose down and then the car flipped over.
Okay.
I am surprised he is not up.
Pretty lucky.
Oh my God. Yeah.
When Roy left the scene, she assumed the case was in good hands.
Thinking that when you drive away, that all those responders who showed up, all those people who were there, who chose a path of caring for other people, we're going to take care of this person, get them to the hospital, and then see that due diligence down that path.
But we let her know that due diligence never happened. How come? Federal court documents show this driver played a role in a much larger scheme focused on officers and an Albuquerque law firm profiting off of making DWI cases disappear, what the feds have dubbed the DWI enterprise.
Hey man, I'm Officer Montano with APD. I was on the crash site with you.
Now at the hospital, you can see the driver's in a neck brace and his whole body's been roughed up. He can barely talk to Officer Joshua Montano.
I can smell some alcohol, man. How much did you drink tonight?
I'm sorry, I just had a little bit.
A little bit?
Yes.
Montano conducts a few field sobriety tests, which he says help him determine.
I have to place you under arrest for DWI.
But because the driver is in the hospital, it's APD protocol that Montano will send a criminal summons in the mail rather than take him to jail that night. So he gets his information. You can actually see the man's phone number written on Montano's hand.
You're no longer in custody. You may get some paperwork in the mail in a couple weeks.
But instead, Montano admits he gave the driver's contact information to Albuquerque paralegal Ricardo Rick Mendez, who told the feds he contacted the driver and got him to pay in exchange for no charges being filed. To make that happen, Officer Montano says he got a portion of the driver's payment. No summons was sent. If it had been, the police report shows this driver would have been facing a DWI third offense.
I'm fine. Okay.
Repeat offenders aren't the only ones who got a break with an offer to participate in the scheme.
Okay. All right, we're gonna have the ambulance come check you out. We'll just wait right over here, okay?
Court records show this driver has 0 criminal record, and it would remain that way.
How much you had to do? 2 drinks.
That's Officer Honorio Alba Jr., who worked alongside Montano in APD's DWI unit.
Leave your license with you, man.
We see Alba place the driver's ID in his belt and never see Alba return it to the man. In his admission of guilt to the feds, Alba tells investigators he often handed off licenses to Mendez. So that may have been how Mendez got a hold of this driver to offer the scheme. Because both Mendez and Alba admitted to the feds, despite this driver crossing the median into oncoming traffic and crashing his BMW into a pole on Lomas Boulevard, and Alba observing, quote, signs of impairment during the field sobriety tests, which resulted in his arrest, and Alba driving him to the prisoner transport center, where he tells the man he blew a .22 on the breathalyzer test twice. This driver also spent the night in the hospital instead of a jail cell.
I gotta take you to the hospital based on your vehicle having airbag deployments. It's the jail's rules, okay?
And rather than sending a criminal summons for driving drunk, Alba admits he received money from the driver funneled through Mendez to never file charges.
I asked the FBI if we will ever know how many drivers avoided charges. Special Agent in Charge Raul Buhanda tells me it's possible the key players don't even know they were just taking as many payments as they could. He added that also makes it difficult to measure the impact the scheme has had in our community.
The things that we don't know, the things that we haven't been able to connect together, were someone that was released and got off the hook, so to speak, because of this scheme and ended up harming someone else, whether it was in a car accident or even taking someone's life. I mean, I don't even want to go there, but I mean, it's a very high possibility.
And first of all, these cases involved DWI and they also involved crashes. So It's just another level of seriousness. The officers we see in the lapels are former APD officers Joshua Montano, Honorio Alba. Both of them have since pled guilty in the corruption scheme in federal court. In your story, we see them used accused drunk drivers' licenses to connect them with a defense attorney, Thomas Clear's office, where they can ultimately get a payoff and a guaranteed dismissal for those accused drunk drivers. So the whole situation is just wild and just such an injustice. How were you able to find that these drivers did pay to get their cases dismissed?
Yeah, these were admissions of guilt from, these were included in the admissions of guilt from the 2 officers, Joshua Montano and Honorio Alba Jr., as well as the paralegal, Ricardo Rick Mendez. They admitted in their plea deals to us never letting these 2 drivers' cases get to charges. Never even got to that point. So they included initials in this paperwork. They included dates. And so I was able to pinpoint these 2 cases based on the time frame provided, the arresting officers' names, those initials of the drivers that were mentioned in these federal court documents. And then I checked court records to see were charges ever actually filed. And of course they weren't in these. And what I thought was so important about getting these stories out there is we knew about this scheme. We knew how it worked a year ago almost, whenever we had first learned about it. Or we thought we did, right? We didn't know that in some cases charges were just never even being filed. People were paying before the case went to a court. I mean, what, are they just losing the documents?
Yeah. How are you supposed to know about that?
Exactly.
In this case, it seemed, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like kind of the way to do that was these drivers went to the hospital first. They didn't have to get booked into jail right away.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was, of course, the case that just made this so much easier, right, for these 2 to get off the hook, because both of them, as you mentioned, did go to the hospital. And so then per APD protocol, you're not booked into jail. They're not sitting there with you overnight, waiting to arrest you. So that's kind of what made this so easy.
Yeah, I want to mention the woman too. I mentioned the witness. When you called her to track down an interview, what was her reaction to learn this case was not in good hands when I left the scene that day.
Yeah, Pam Roy, just an amazing community member, truly still very involved in her community. And she was shocked. I mean, first of all, you got the news calling you, right, asking you about a case that you witnessed years ago. But she could tell me every detail from that night. And the two of us had a phone call. I just kind of got chills thinking about this because the two of us had a phone call. I had just watched the lapel video and she is telling me absolutely everything. Like,
that you had just seen.
Yes, that I just watched her tell the police officer on scene. I mean, she remembered it. And why wouldn't you, right? I mean, this man crashed his vehicle. She said he was so drunk. Like, it was upsetting. And this is on the highway and it's late at night and...
Yeah.
You know, and she was the one who called 911. So she did have to relay all that information too.
One more really upsetting detail that came out of this story is that it just seems like we'll never know the full scope of the impact. How many cases we will never know, you know, got off the hook through this scheme or just were impacted by the ripple effect of the scheme, right?
And that... I asked the FBI, the former, now former FBI special agent in charge, that question. And it kind of gave him pause. He really had to think about how to properly answer that, I think. But he also just was realizing in real time the gravity of this, right? Because we don't know how many of these people got off the hook, never got charged, and then caused a crash. Or God knows what else, right? What kind of havoc they may have wreaked in this community. So yeah, really, really upsetting.
Yeah. Well, we'll take one more quick break. And when we come back, our final piece sort of tackles that big question of losing faith in the people that you're supposed to trust.
All right, we are back with one final piece in our KRQE Investigates special. It's a story tackling the big question that this scheme has really caused us all to start asking ourselves. How can we trust the police, the people that we are supposed to rely on, who we call on in an emergency? How can we trust that they are on the right side of the law, have our safety, our best intentions in mind when they interact with us? That's a question that Gabby was able to ask and really raises even more questions, I think.
A now disgraced paralegal, Rick Mendez, was the first domino to fall in January. Later, his boss, former defense attorney Thomas Clear III, admitted to leading the so-called DWI enterprise since 1995, working with law enforcement officers from Albuquerque Police, the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office, and New Mexico State Police. A criminal enterprise conspiring to get DWI cases dismissed in court in exchange for cash, extorting people arrested by the officers.
As a community, I think we just have to let this sink in, feel the gravity of what is happening.
The gravity of what's happening, says Leon Howard, interim executive director of ACLU New Mexico, includes officers admitting they profited by breaking laws they were entrusted to uphold.
Their motive was not to keep the community safe. Their motive was to make money.
A growing list of officers now convicted criminals includes former APD officers Honorio Alba Jr., Joshua Montano, Neil Elsman, and former BCSO deputy Jeff Hamrell. All pled guilty in federal court to conspiracy, extortion, and bribery charges.
Medina's been a part of this police department for a long time, and if he didn't know, he should have known. And so I just don't know of any position of leadership where something to this scale can happen and there not be consequences.
Albuquerque Mayor Tim Keller tells us he stands by APD's leadership.
It takes a lot, I think, to be the team that cleans it up and owns it. And that's what we've done.
And APD Chief Harold Medina argues he's been proactive and transparent when it comes to how his department is handling the scheme and weeding out corruption.
Who's sitting here now, who has made sure that he has been proactive as possible, started internal investigations like no other entity. I have interviewed everybody we possibly can. We have had several individuals quit. I don't know how much more proactive we could have been to address this issue.
In January, APD announced DWI unit reforms as a result of the scheme, including entering missed court notices into APD's internal affairs intake system to determine why an officer missed court. Administrative changes include a new DWI unit handbook, daily briefings, and a more reliable case tracking system. Chief Medina also signed a special order officially capping gifts to officers at $50 and prohibiting any gift from an attorney they regularly interact with in court. As for BCSO, Sheriff John Allen says he's hiring a compliance officer to monitor court cases with his deputies and trusting the FBI to handle the criminal investigation.
I want to find everybody in this agency, in law enforcement, that is doing this nonsense because it makes everybody around the nation look like crap.
And New Mexico State Police Chief Troy Weisler says he's doing an internal probe as one of his most prominent DWI sergeants implicated in the scheme remains on leave.
We'll have to go through the whole process and see what turns out on the other side, but we will be working day in and day out to regain the trust of the community.
When it comes to accountability at the top,
has the bar come with any kind of recommendations how they're going to hold lawyers accountable? Has the courts decided we're going to have training? We're going to keep statistics on this? Paralegals, has anybody said, hey, maybe we should have a process to vet paralegals? Mendez was a felon, had drug arrests, and he became a paralegal with this confidential information. All the ripe background for corruption.
Medina argues changes beyond law enforcement are also needed.
I just wish the other parties involved in the criminal justice system did one thing to be proactive and ensure that they're also doing their part, because this was not orchestrated by law enforcement officers alone.
Are you confident that a scheme like this cannot perpetuate moving forward?
We can't say with a bit of confidence that this is the end of it, that nothing like this can happen again.
While citizens have options when it comes to picking private attorneys, Howard argues the public just has to trust any law enforcement officer they may interact with on the street, during a reported crime, or on a traffic stop. And trust in the police is paramount.
We all implicitly want to trust officers. They were lying and getting away with it. And so we all have to question ourselves and hold them accountable and not just take their word for everything they say.
Gabrielle Burkhart, KRQE Investigates.
Really some strong words from the ACLU, Gabby, calling for a complete overhaul of the Albuquerque Police Department. We've heard that, of course, from community members as well. But then you've got Medina saying, well, this went on for 30 years. Look, I found it. I cleaned it up. It doesn't appear a lot of people are buying that defense. Did he say anything else in your conversation with the chief of police that really stuck out to you?
Well, yeah, just to address the question, right? Because in Thomas Clear III's plea agreement in federal court, that's when we really learned the timeline, and it was really shocking to all of us. Thomas Clear admitted that this scheme goes back to at least 1995,
right?
Which means 30 years, right? And this was a period of time that Medina was working with Albuquerque police. He was with APD for a number of years before he came back and became the chief. So there were real questions from the community and from the ACLU about, how much did the top brass know about this scheme? Medina has been clear from the beginning that he didn't know. He used to work in property crimes. I remember interviewing him for property crimes related stories. But for this particular story, I thought it was important to go back to Chief Medina and ask him to respond to these kind of questions, but also really people calling that he should be fired. Like, why is Mayor Keller keeping him around, was the question that I was hearing from different community leaders and from the ACLU. And Chief Medina's answer was like, look, we are being transparent in what we found. We're getting rid of everybody that we know who was potentially connected. We're being transparent, which you and I have done a lot of interviews with APD. So I will say, yes, they did a lot of changing and shifting and putting people under internal affairs investigations.
Right, you mentioned the policy changes that they implemented.
Yeah, the policy changes. So they did do a lot. And Chief Medina also kind of pointed the fingers at the district attorney's office and said, look, how was Rick Mendez able to have all the information that he had as a paralegal? Where are the checks and balances for those sort of agencies? Because it wasn't just law enforcement operating the scheme, and he's right. But then on the flip side of that, right, you have the other argument, well, you know, people kind of have a choice for who they hire as far as like private attorneys. People don't really have a choice when they call 911 and which officer shows up to their traffic crash or who pulls them over in a traffic stop. So that's kind of, you know, where the difference lies is like the police are publicly funded and we really should be able to trust that all of them have our best interests at heart.
Right. And I just find it so interesting. We see his demeanor in this story. And when you go back to the beginning of our special and you see the Bernalillo County Sheriff's demeanor, do you think that they are handling this differently?
100%. And that was interesting too, to include all three agencies, right? Because like you said at the very beginning, it was only Albuquerque police officers implicated in the scheme.
For a full year.
Yeah. Through these plea deals, we learned, oh, this goes way beyond APD. They were working with state police, BCSO. These are all the three main agencies in our state, in our metro area. So I think when you go back and you interview all the leaders of these three departments, they're all handling it differently. Chief Medina and APD have been pretty transparent insofar as like I know that they have gone back and went through case files of all of their officers to see where they overlapped with Tom Clear. I'm not certain all those other agencies did the same thing. The state police chief says he's running his own internal investigation now. That is still ongoing. They've still got a sergeant on leave. BCSO obviously didn't seem to know at the beginning that they had anyone involved. So
Right.
just very different approaches here on how the leaders of each agency handled this.
Well, as we have learned, this is the story that somehow just keeps on giving. There are so many layers to this. We've been tackling every single angle that we can. At this point, as of this recording, 7 police officers, law enforcement officers have taken plea deals, admitted to their role in this scheme. 6 of them Albuquerque police officers, 1 a Bernalillo County Sheriff's deputy. You can see their plea deals. You can see our extensive coverage online on KRQE.com. I know we're going to continue to cover this.
For sure. So stick with us and check out all of our work online. You can also watch all of our work in our investigations on the KRQE Now app on your smart TV and at krqe.com/investigations. Thank you so much for watching.